we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully people will continue to come in and join us tonight. Just want to thank you all for joining me on this live. Move this over a little bit. On this live tonight. Last time it was very interesting. It was a lot of fun though. But as you can see, we have another special guest tonight, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves in a second. But last week I was the only female on here. And even though they're family, that should have been more reason for me to bring somebody else on here anyway. And because they tried to gang up on me last week, y'all. But it was not really, but it was a great conversation. And so I'm excited. It's been a lot of people inboxing me since last week. I've been getting text messages, Facebook messages, just saying how much they enjoyed you young men last week. I guess me too, but they just said they enjoyed, I'm sure it was you all. But they said that they enjoyed it last week and they were waiting on a part 2. So we are doing a part 2 tonight, but we wanted to have a little bit of a woman's perspective tonight as well. So that's why I have Ellwanda. So we have a couple people joining us. I see Christy. Hey, Christy, Mama's on here. Vincent White Sr., that's Ellwanda's husband. And so he's on here. Hey, cuz. Brandon Shropshire, Michelle. Hey, Michelle. Janice. It's a bunch of people on here. Corey, I see my schoolmate Corey on here. Kiki, Marcus, Kristen, Chris Jordan, all the way from Detroit. That's our cousin Chris from Detroit.
Chris, what's going on, Chris?
All right.
Who else we seeing here? Christy. So it's a lot of people in here. So let's go ahead and get started. I want everyone to introduce themselves. Starting with, I'll start with TJ. I don't know how you all look, depending on if you're looking on Facebook or not. Go ahead, TJ, you start. Let everyone know who you are.
Hello, everyone. I hope you all doing extremely well today. Listen, my name is TJ. That's my nickname. My real name is Ternae Jordan Jr. I am the oldest brother of Ellwanda Jordan. I'm blessed to be her brother. Love the girl a lot. And I am Ternae Jordan Jr. Of course, my father, which you'll get a chance to be introduced to in a minute. If you don't know him, is my father. My mother is Angela Jordan, and married, have a daughter, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Ellwanda, you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. I am Minister Ellwanda White. I am also Ellwanda Jordan and Minister TJ, JaMichael, and Pastor Jordan's cousin. Close-knit family. I'm married, been married 31 years, have 4 children and 3 grandchildren. And I am just happy to be invited to assist Ellwanda with facilitating tonight and give her some star power.
I had to get me a strong Black woman on here tonight. Go ahead, JaMichael.
Well, I am JaMichael Jordan. I am Ellwanda's youngest, oldest brother. She'll let you know that in a minute.
I raised him.
Yeah. Married, 2 kids, married Amanda, son Nason and Micah. One is 2 years old, one is 5 months. And I think that's pretty much all I got.
Thank you. You're on mute.
We just said this too.
King is still on mute.
You're on mute, Pastor.
At least he's happy. He's
right, I'm back again.
But TJ predicted that, didn't he? At the beginning.
I said I was going to
Excuse me of being the old guy. But listen, I am Ternae Jordan. I'm responsible for all of these kids that's on here. They're not kids anymore. I'm Ellwanda's father, Ternae and JaMichael's father. I am Ellwanda's cousin. And she told you guys she's been married 31 years. I married her to my cousin 31 years ago. And when I put the glue on you, you stuck.
Thank you. And I am Ellwanda Jordan, and I am a life coach and business coach. I also work for an organization called Lunch Chattanooga, where we help business startups, and I do business coaching, and I'm also director of business support for them. But tonight I'm solo, and so these are my perspectives. This is a way for me to actually start introducing my book. I am in the process of writing and completing my first book called My Life, My Story, Our Lessons. And in this book, I share my life experiences, some mistakes I made, failures, even some successes, and the lessons that I learned from them. And I want to use this book. God laid it on my heart. I did not want to write it, but I am using this book to help others try to avoid some of the same pitfalls that I've had, avoid some of the potholes that flatten my tires along the way. And so that is the point of the book, and to be able to teach other people how to be able to share their story as well from their lessons. And so that's why we are here tonight. Last week, we had a great conversation. Our title and topic is The Mind of a Man. Part 1 was last week. And we had some great discussion. We talked about what it was like to be a Black male in America, what it was like to be just a Black man or a man in general. We talked about love. We talked about respect. We talked about relationships. We talked about fatherhood. We talked about a lot of things. And we only have an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. But we have a lot to cover tonight as well. And so tonight, last week, the biggest question that was being asked was, well, not the biggest question. The biggest discussion that we had last week was when I asked the question, what do men want? And what do men need? And the answer that was given by literally all three of you all was respect. That was the number one thing that was said, was respect. And as I was thinking about this, after I went back and watched the replay and everything, one thing I think that happens a lot of times is that we say things or we hear things and we just take it at face value. But we really don't know what respect may look like. You hear respect. You hear a woman say, I respect a man. You hear a man say, I want respect. But unless it is a clear definition and people really have a clear understanding of what that respect looks like, it doesn't matter. It might as well be null and void. So I want to start with that tonight. I want to talk about what does respect look like? And I want to cover it on several different ends. I want to talk about what does respect look like coming from your woman or your significant other or your wife or spouse or whatever. And then I want to talk about what it looks like maybe coming from society, coming from your business partners, employers, just across the whole board. So let's start now. What does respect, when you think about respect, what does that look like when it comes from a woman? Since that's what really all of the women want to talk about. And anyone can start.
Right out of being scared.
Yeah, we have to warm up like we did last week. But yeah, I think the word, I think we talked about last week. First of all, let me lay the foundation as a reminder of last week. When we talked about what a man wants, we talked about the difference between a good man and a godly man. And I think that we determined that in order to be a good man, that you need to be a 1-O man, Godly, rather than just a Godly man, because it's relevant. You got to have some principles. You got to have some basics. So when you talk about what a man wants or what does respect look like, I think you have to go back to where we described it last week. If you read Ephesians, and I'm going biblical, we'll get personal in a minute, but when you read Ephesians chapter 5, and it talks about, it tells the husband to love his wife. You can start at first of all, at verse 21, it says that we should submit to one another. And then we get to the verse that all men love. I mean, when I do marriage counseling, all brothers, they can't spell Bible. They've never opened the Bible. They don't know what the scripture look like, but they all know this verse. That's Ephesians 5:22. Women, submit to your own husband. We know that verse, all right? And so you really, a lot of women have a problem with that, and that's something that we may need to discuss. But when you start getting into that verse, those verses, next few verses, it starts talking about husbands love your wives, husbands love your wife, husbands love your wife as Christ loved the church. And then it gets to that last verse, which I think is the 32nd verse of the 5th chapter of Ephesians. And it says one thing: women, respect your husband. And I usually have fun with that when I'm doing my counseling, because when I'm talking about how to love your wife, how do you love your wife, I'm making the men understand it has not said one time for her to love you. It does not say for her to love you. It's just husbands, love your wife. And then it gets to that last verse and it says, and women, respect your husband. And so that sounds like it doesn't mean that the man should love his wife or the wife should love her husband, but that word respect covers it all. That is the way men receive love. And so when you are showing respect, that's how a brother receives love. Now, you want to know what that looks like. It really depends on who the man is. And I think we have to be careful when we make general statements, because not all women desire or need the same thing. And likewise, not all men need and necessarily want the same thing.
When we talk about respecting, being respected, basically just having admiration for the brother's qualities, having of his abilities and what he's capable of doing. We're not perfect. No one's perfect. But just approve. Give us a little warmth of approval, saying, look, I know this is who you are. I love you for who you are. I respect you for who you are. I'm not judging you. You know, I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. But just respect me with my flaws and all. You know, not to talk down to me, not to make me feel less of a man when I make a mistake. Encourage me. You know, we need encouragement. My God, do we as men need encouragement? It's hard to be a man. Yeah. It is hard to be a man out here in this world. And sometimes we just need to just say, hey, I'm proud of you. I love you. A good job, you know, or you can do it. Just give us some encouragement. And that right there shows that you at least approve of us at least trying or being who we are. And we can work together till we both can improve. So that's when I talk about respect, just, you know, respect who I am and who I am not, you know, and I think that's how we can get the respect that we're looking for from our women.
Yeah. I think when you talk about the word respect, when we're talking about that, I think this is amazing kind of what we're doing right now, because depending on the generation you come from, respect is going to look different. If you look at dad's generation, you look at granddad's generation, the level of respect and what was viewed as respectable and what they looked for was totally different than what my age group is dealing with and what TJ's age group is dealing with and your age group, because the roles have changed in some ways. Now you have women who usually had to depend on men to be the breadwinners, to get things done, to make things happen. And the wife traditionally, or the woman traditionally, was quote unquote to say, be married, birth kids, and be barefooted and be able to cook. So that was respect. So when granddad and dad was coming along, as long as the meals were prepared, the children were taken care of, and you allow me to do what I need to do, that's showing me respect. You don't give me mouth about it, right? So now when you look at my generation, where you see women who are excelling on a different level, who and in some cases are making more than the man, you can get an argument started because a woman feels traditionally that a man should have these characteristics and these roles, right? But in the society that we live in, I may not be able to bring home the biggest check, right? But that doesn't mean that you talk down to me about it. It does not mean that you belittle me about it. It actually gives you more reason to push me and encourage me more and show me more respect, because you understand the dynamics of the world that we're living in right now. And so I think for me, or just for men my age, when we look at respect, it's number one, realizing that it's not about finances, but it's more or less about letting me lead, right? When I look at respect, we can have discussions all day. We can talk all day. And I believe in a good relationship, you have to communicate. You have to have a discussion. But at the very same time, as a man and as your husband, what I say biblically, it goes because I'm the head of the house, right? And I think that's what I know that's what the Bible says when it says be submissive, to know that we can have communication, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with me because I am the head. And I believe that showing that type of understanding and respect is what men really look for, as well as the encouragement that CJ said.
Thank you.
The one just to kind of piggyback on what everybody said, what I hear each of you saying, and how I have always reviewed it from a woman's point of view, is to allow that man to lead, allow him to be the leader that God has designed him to be. So that's what I hear all of you saying. Although you expressed it differently, that's the bottom line. Allow him to be the leader of that home.
That's good. That's good.
And I agree with you, and I also agree with you, Michael. That is that the man's role is to lead. Mm-hmm. But again, I think JaMichael kind of segmented us into generations, and of course, I always being the oldest generation. But it does look different. The world looks different. Relationships look different. And that goes back to what I said in the beginning. You have to know your partner, and you must know what it is what their love language is. You know, we were talking about love language last week. You could be giving me something and say you're giving me respect, and it is nothing like I need. And I think when you talk about respect, you're talking about the needs of that individual. And when you do encourage, lift them up. And as TJ said, I don't want to minimize this, because I think too many people in the African-American community don't realize the stress and the strain that it takes to be not just a male, but a Black male in our culture and and the one thing you want is that whoever that is, quote, loving you, or you come home after you done dealt with the pressures of the world, the pressures of life, you don't want that is supposed to be encouraging you, dogging you, or downing you. And then, well, I'm sure we'll get on this. Give me some space.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that those are all great things. And from the sounds of it, I think I'm a pretty good woman. I know to respect a man.
Yeah. You remember last week when you were using yourself as an example? You know, I think you are a good example, but I think you're asking questions for these other women.
I ain't. Oh yeah, you're right. I'm a good woman. Yeah,
okay. Right. I mean, you always have to exert yourself and your characteristics. You're a guide for these others to help.
That it's called My Story Monday.
Hey, but you're trying to help other people.
Why are you asking us about our life?
Ask about yours.
Include everybody. You didn't give me a chance. I was straight to the chat. So I have Lily Johnson. She said, "Amen, JaMichael. Obey the Lord in this matter." Y'all was talking for a while, so she said that a little while ago. Mama said, "As women, you better believe if you do not respect your man, another woman will notice and give the respect he desires," and that is so true. Yeah. So and Catherine said, "I think respect requires empathy." I think all of those are good comments. One thing I will say, just touching kind of on what Mom said, that is so true. And I find that especially when you have a man in leadership, and I'm not just talking about a man in ministry, but probably especially ministry, but in ministry, when you have men, executives of companies, you have men in a uniform, police officers, whoever, a lot of women are drawn to that. And so that's also another added layer, another added layer of when men aren't getting what they desire or what they feel that they need at home, then oftentimes, not saying it's right, it does open those doors and leave things open sometimes for Satan to enter. And so that is good. So going into something else. Hey, Chris, he said, "Good word tonight, family. Very helpful." Thank you. Miss Russell, she's joining. So another question. So when we're talking about respect, we just talked about respect from a woman, and we might go back to that in a little bit on a different kind of vibe. But how does respect look coming from society outside of the home, or even coming from your children? What does that look like? And everybody doesn't have to answer every question, but what does that look like coming from your children, coming from and I think those are probably two very broad questions, but coming from society. For instance, let's talk about this, since we've been talking about racism, police brutality, all of that stuff. How does that look when you get pulled over as a Black man and the police come up to the car? What does respect from a police officer or an authoritative figure look like?
Let me talk for Dad for just Dad had a rough week. Yeah, I'm gonna let him gather his thoughts first.
Wisdom, that's wise.
Right.
All right.
I think for me, especially during this time, respect for me, I would want any officer to treat me just like they would treat their child or someone they loved or cared about. If you can do that, if I can yes sir you, then I expect to be a yes sir. I expect it to be a cordial exchange. I think a lot of times, a lot of instances, whenever we get pulled over, there's already an anxiety built up about it, right? So I believe, and I can't tell an officer what to do, but I believe the best scenario in this situation is for you to remain calm and for the officer to understand the arena in which we're getting ready to engage, and understand that it's his job to make sure that the situation does not escalate, but to come to de-escalate the situation. And when I look at respect, as long as you treat, I believe that everything that you give should be given back to you. So if I'm respecting you, I believe for you to respect me as well. I don't assume for you to assume that I'm guilty before proving it. I hope that you will assume that I'm innocent before proving guilty. Yes, sir. No, sir. And we can get out of there just fine. So when I look at respect, I don't want to be called boy. I don't want to be called out of my name. I don't want to be asked to be pulled out of a car without a search warrant or a reason to do that. I believe that's what respect is. Give me the same respect that you would give someone you love, or someone who looks like you that may not look like me. And so I believe that's what I look for with respect from officers.
That's good too. And I just insert a little bit there. And I also believe a lot of that has to do with culture too, understanding culture. And I think that that's why it's so important for police officers to have proper training, to have been exposed to different cultures, because different cultures respond to things differently. And if you approach a Black man, and he's talking loud, it doesn't mean that he's aggressive or that he's upset, but a lot of Black men do talk loud sometimes. And so I just think, and there's so many other characteristics, but I'm just saying, as far as knowing how to deal with different cultures and being able to adapt and adjust to the people that you're coming in contact with. And I think if they were properly trained and show that type of respect, and I think we would, have a lot less issues as well. So anyone else want to touch on that?
I think when you say respect, I think the important thing is not to try to be confrontational. And I think sometimes authorities do that. And I think sometimes others do that. I want to say this. Many of you know that I started Stop the Madness along with some others probably pretty close to 25, 30 years ago. And one of the things that I've had the unfortunate task is of burying a lot of people, young brothers, I should say. And it's always been interesting to me is that particularly when I was in Fort Wayne, I lived in a community where if someone, and this happens most of the time, someone kills somebody, then they know who they are. And so I would have to go to the hospital with families who had lost someone, and then leave the hospital and go to the jail from the person who perpetuated the violence. And I would always ask question, man, what made you do that? And the answer was always, they diss me, real. They diss me. Diss meaning disrespect. And so the key has always been is the word on the street is respect and disrespect. And that's why I think it's important that what JaMichael said, that means different things to different generations. Even the language means different. And so, but I think when a brother says that, for the most time, he's talking about he confronted me, or he downplayed me, or that kind of thing, which there is no excuse. I mean, if I did that to every time somebody dissed me, I would be on this call by myself.
That brings up something. What does it do to a man when they are disrespected, or they're emasculated, or dehumanized? I see where Catherine said it's about humanity. That's so true. It's about humanity. What does that do to a man's soul? What does that do to his esteem, his confidence?
One of the things I know that's difficult for me, and I've been, disrespected numerous times in my life. But the hardest thing to do is to not disrespect them back when you're angry, when you're upset. But what I had to realize is the fact that I have to respect myself first, right? I have to give myself respect, because I know that if I don't respect myself and I disrespect somebody else because I couldn't control myself, then that can go any way. And sometimes you got to put your pride down so that you can go home. Sometimes you need to just put your pride down so you can be safe, And there's been many times I had to bite my tongue. There's been many times I had to put my hand in my pocket, and when somebody totally disrespected me. But it got to the point that I had to say to myself, I can do this two ways. I can bite my tongue, suck it up like a man, because sometimes it takes a bigger man to walk away from a situation. I had to suck it up, bite my tongue, put my hand in my pocket, pray and say, Lord, get me out of this so I can go home. And then I go home, pray about it, or I come to one of y'all and tell y'all about how angry I was. But sometimes there are some people that will disrespect you enough just so you can cross that bridge, cross that line, so they can have the right to do what they feel like they have to do to you. And sometimes you just gotta say, look, I respect myself enough, I respect my family enough, I respect my friends enough that I need to do what I need to do to walk away and come home. All right. And so I know a lot of times we talk about people disrespecting us, but sometimes you got to respect yourself. You know what I'm saying? Respect yourself to do what you have to do just so the situation won't get out of hand. And it takes a lot. It can mess with your pride. It can mess with your pride. But sometimes that's the safest way.
I heard a couple of days ago, a guy was on TV and he was talking about, he was a witness for one of the incidents. I can't remember who it was. It's been so many. But one of the gentlemen that lost their lives due to police brutality at the hands of a police officer. And he said one of the hardest things to do is to sit there and watch a man's life be taken, and you're standing there and there's nothing you can do about it. He said, and as bad as he wanted to jump in and do something, he said, I loved my fellow man, but I loved my children more. And I just wanted to make sure I got home. And I can't imagine what that does to your soul and your heart and your spirit when it's literally nothing you can do. You know what I mean? And with the whole.
Well, I agree and I disagree, because I think for me, the problem for me is never what they'll do to me. A lot of times is what I find myself wanting to do to them. Kind of like what TJ is. It's never what they'll do to me, it's what I will do to them. And that's why what TJ said is very important. You have to know yourself. You have to know that regardless of what they say to you, regardless of, first of all, they didn't know you until they just pulled up on you and pulled you over, right? So you have to be confident in who you are as a person first, right? When you're comfortable with who you are and you know whose you are, you're created in the image of God, and there's nothing nobody can say to demean you to the point that you forget that, then you can sit there and you can compose yourself to get out of that situation. But what you said is very important too. It's hard seeing people being mistreated and you feel like there's nothing you can do. You have to make a very conscious decision. And so I think when it comes to seeing other people mistreated, that's what burdens me the most. I'm cool if it's me. I'm cool because I'm comfortable with me. But seeing other people, like you said, that's tough.
That's so good. So good.
But I think, and I think that refers to what DeJuan mentioned earlier. It's one thing being responsible for you and your family, but when you are responsible for other people,
Yeah.
you're responsible. And we really don't have time, and I don't think it's necessary. I think one of the things that it's sitting at on this call tonight is for ministers, for people who have a call from God. And we could talk about this on our own, but to help everybody else, maybe they don't understand that perspective of just being responsible for not just yourself, but hundreds or tens of other people. So that's a whole different ball game of how you act and respond. But it is something that you did say that is very important. And I think brothers need to, and if we're talking to brothers tonight, you need to think about what you said. So what TJ said, it's all about self-control. Number two, it's all about knowing who you are. You can't convince me of who I am. I know who I am, and there's nothing you can say or do. And that doesn't matter whether it's in the street or in my house. It doesn't matter. You can't convince me who I am. I know my heart. I know me. And so what you said, sometimes it's better to walk away, if not because you're afraid, but your family, children need fathers. I can't tell you how many times I've had to clamp down, say nothing, because I had 3 people at home that needed me to bring some bread home. And so I think that's where you start understanding who you are and what's important, and understanding responsibility. What is responsibility? The ability to properly respond under any circumstance.
That brings me to the mind of something that my grandmother used to say. It's not what they call you, it's what you answer to. So that's what comes to thought from a woman's perspective. You know, when I'm approached negatively, it's not what you calling me. It's, you know, it's what I know I am. It's what I answer to.
Absolutely. And let me go to, I have a couple people in the chat. I have Adila, that's one of my BFFs, y'all. Adila said, impressive group of people with a productive and open perspective. Thank you, Adila. We have some great conversations, and she's a great person to have discussions with as well. Kevin Robinson said, it's equivalent to the Willie Lynch concept. It breaks you to a point that you want to act a fool. There are words that people know of and use in attempting us to cross that line. I agree with TJ, you have to be a better person. And that feeds right into what Minister Ellwanda just said about, it's not what they call you, it's about what you answer to. So that's good. Hey, Sabrina. Let's see. Okay. So moving on to a different topic. I wanted to go a little deeper, but I'm gonna keep that where it is. So here's a question. Let's go to another topic. What kind? How can women tell the difference between a respectable man and a no good man? So once again, I grew up in a home where I have been able to see what good men are, what respectable men are, what godly men look like. But for a lot of women, they don't really know until they might be laying on the floor after being hit or punched, and they aren't able to really identify a lot of those red flags, you know. And so a lot of times if they say the right words or whatever reason suck them in, they aren't able to identify those things or tell the difference until sometimes it's too late. So what would you say would be some of the characteristics between a good godly man? Because I'm a woman of faith, we all are. And so we're going to talk about godly men, a good godly man and a man that means, you know, good, unequally yoked.
Well, I think one of the things is, first of all, you want to talk about godly men, they have to know God and they have to portray godly ways and godly characteristics. One of the ways to determine if a person is a godly man is, first of all, as a woman, you need to have your non-negotiables. All right. You need to say, listen, this is what a godly man looks like. A godly man would say this. A godly man would do this. A godly man, if it lines up with the word of God, you have to have your non-negotiables. The problem is a lot of young ladies and women don't have non-negotiables. right? And they accept anything. So, well, he's a nice guy. He helps out the homeless. He does this, that, or whatever. But you haven't been looking for godly characteristics. So until you can determine what a godly man is and a godly man that you desire to have, when you see an individual or a brother that does not, portray that or does not align with that godly characteristics that God talks about, then you're always going to be misled. So I think that is, you got to have your non-negotiables. You got to say, this is what I'm looking for. And if they don't have this, no, I can't, So have your non-negotiables.
So what are some of those characteristics? What are some of those non-negotiables, those things? Because we can say non-negotiables that could be, he can't be short, he can't be all these things. But when you're talking about non-negotiables, what does those characteristics and things look like for?
Can I interject? And I'm gonna let JaMichael speak, but let me interject something here, because again, I want to make sure that we're helping who we need to be helping. Okay. First of all, an ungodly woman is not going to be looking for a godly man. That's number one. And before you can determine what it is you're looking for, you got to know who you are. And I think sometimes we get what we're looking for. And when we started talking about godly characteristics, we can talk about that all day. But again, if you're not a godly woman, you usually attract what you're looking for. Okay. So the first thing you got to know is who you are. And as TJ said, what your non-negotiables, but before you can know what your non-negotiables for in someone else, you got to know, okay, I'm pitching the ball to you, JaMichael.
Yeah, I'm like in the middle of both of what you just said. First of all, I'm going to agree and disagree with TJ, what you said. I think a lot of times women do come into situations with non-negotiables. And because they come into situations with non-negotiables, they miss good men. Before we even get into the characteristics of a godly man, the first thing we have to realize is that nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And we miss so many good people, male and female, because we're looking for this perfected person. We're all on this journey, learning and growing together. And what makes a great relationship is when two broken people can grow together to become whole, right? And so I think having certain non-negotiables are important, but you cannot have so many non-negotiables that you eliminate opportunity. And so I think certain non-negotiables, you should never be with a man that beat on you, that mistreats you, that talks down on you, that talks bad to you, that makes you look bad in front of other people. I don't think you should ever be with a man who is selfish to the point that he thinks about himself first and always, and never considers you, how you think, and your emotions. I think a bad characteristics of a man who is not a godly man is somebody who just is not empathetic, right? And so I believe that you have to first realize that you're not perfect, kind of what Dad said, you're not perfect. And so because you're not perfect, you have no authority to call someone this or that.
Good. No good.
You're no good. Ain't nobody no good.
That's
but
right.
But I do believe that, like you said, TJ said, you got to have certain non-negotiables, and we could talk about characteristics now.
Boy, I taught that boy well. Boy, I raised that boy right.
Yeah.
I'm proud of the training y'all gave each other.
So, Ellwanda, when you have a wonderful marriage, I love you and cousin Vincent's relationship. I think it's a beautiful thing. You all are friends. You all get along well. You have fun together. You have a beautiful family. You all have a lot of the same beliefs. So when you were looking, and I'm sure that you all have had this conversation, when you were looking, I guess I'm trying to think of how to word it, but keeping in the mind of a man. But I brought a woman on here I did put on the flyer that I wanted a hint of a woman's perspective, some feminine perspective in here. But when you were looking for a man, did you have any of those non-negotiables? Or were you even looking at the time?
I did. But the first thing I did was I had been through some bad relationships. We've all gone through them. And I had learned a lot. I had learned what I no longer wanted. So I prayed and I asked God for what the type of man I wanted. I was very specific on the type of man that I wanted. And like JaMichael said, nobody's perfect. I was not looking for the perfect man, but I was looking for a man that had the qualities that I felt he needed in order to be compatible with me. So I prayed about it, and God sent what I asked for. I asked for a man that was a godly man. The relationship I was in before my husband, it ended very badly. And so I decided I didn't want anything to do with a man. that was my decision. I'm done. I'm not dating any longer. But as I got closer to God and got in the Word, then I recognized that there is a man out there for me. God has a man out there for me. And so I told him what I wanted, and he sent me Vincent. I wanted a godly man. I wanted a man that I know was not a womanizer. You all know I already had a child. I wanted to make sure that he was going to love my child, was going to treat my child, as if she was his own. And so, yeah, God sent me those things, and I was not willing to settle.
So, Ellwanda, I helped you out too, because,
You did.
I trained Vincent. I told him to do whatever you tell him to do.
It was not easy for me initially. Vincent and I first got married because I had been a single woman. I was very independent. I had graduated college. I was established, and I was used to doing things my way. So there were some adjustment periods there. I mean, there really was. I had to learn how to submit as a wife because I was used to being in that leadership role. But he was very patient with me, and I think I'm there. I think I'm there.
Thank you, Sharon. We had Janice. She said, "Thank you, Dawn. But some women will think that they can change a person, the good, the bad, and the ugly." And we definitely, you need to go back. Were you here last week? Go back and watch last week if you were not here. Part 1. We went deep into being able to change people and how you can't change people and all of that stuff. So definitely go check out part 1, and that is a very true statement.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us in the chat, y'all. Keep them coming. Keep the questions coming. Let's go. We only have about 15 minutes left. Let's talk about something else. What's another question I got? I'm looking at my questions. Okay, so here's one of the questions. We talked about kind of some of the non-negotiables of what women should look for in men, what not to look for, and all of that stuff. But what does a man look for in a wife versus, and this is what I call them, a fun friend or a girlfriend, somebody to date? When you're just dating somebody you want to have fun with, kick it with, and when you get to the point where you say, look, I'm ready to settle down, I want a wife. What are the differences? Because a lot, and the reason I brought that up too, number one, somebody sent it to me, but number two, you find a lot of times where women end up carrying out responsibilities as if they are the wife, when they're only the friend or the girlfriend, whether it's to try to reel them in, whether it's because they just love having that relationship and they're trying to make it into more, whatever the reason is. What are the differences? And how, and I guess how y'all just talk about it. How can a woman know if a man just trying to be friends?
I don't know if we understand the question. I'm not sure we really
Okay,
do.
so let me break it down for you. What's the difference? What does a man look for when he's looking for a wife as opposed to when he's just dating and looking for somebody to kick it with? And actually, let me start. Go ahead.
No, again, I have to frame the question right, because when we ask general question, what does a man, it really boils down to what do you need and what are you looking for? You, not a group of men and women. And one of the things that I think you have to understand, that everybody who has a grip on who they are single, unique, and whole. There are no two people alike. And if you're not whole yourself, then you're going to get whatever you're looking for. But I think that any male is looking for someone that will respect him, I wouldn't say any male, I would say a person who knows who they are, who is a godly man. They don't want somebody that's been with everybody, trying to figure out, is this the right one or not? And we really do have to be real in this thing. You know, in a lot of times in my experience, I have found that people who got men don't want them, which makes it so easy for somebody who want a man because they don't have one. And I think if there's any advice I can give to a woman is that if you got one, don't just try to satisfy him until he put a ring on your finger or he says, I do. I mean, we've talked about what a man does. Men can be insecure sometimes. We can be insecure. So what happens is if you got him and you're not making him feel, because ain't nobody else, and he is the head. So if the head is not in place, then nothing else. And I've seen this in so many marriages. I've seen people who have come in and they're sitting in each other's lap, and I'm counseling them, and they talking about what they're going to be for each other. And as soon as she stops saying those things, we talking about a woman. I know y'all want to talk about a man, but we talking about a woman. She stops saying those things. She keeps doing those things. And then he's out there trying to be the man, and everybody who does not have a man is offering. So that is not right, but that is reality. And that's the reality of the world we live in.
Okay, hold on. Chat is blowing up right now.
That's good. That's what I want.
Sabrina said, oh, they against you. No, I'm just joking.
I know they are, but that's fine. I'm trying to help them.
No, they're not. So, Sabrina said, amen, Ellwanda. I thank you for you and Vincent for showing us a beautiful marriage. Trust me, I have been watching you all. Beautiful, beautiful. Catherine, what about if you raised in a home without a father and a single mother? And then, let's see, and we go back. Denise said, and don't think submit is a bad word if you're with a godly man, because a godly man understands what that word means when he's with a godly woman. That's right. Catherine, let's stop here. This is a good question. Vulnerability is something that is not spoken a lot of, even within relationships while you're dating. Why is that?
Read the question again.
Vulnerability is something that is not spoken a lot of, even within relationships while you're dating. Why is that? Why don't people talk about vulnerability a lot? And Catherine, are you talking about within the relationship between the two people in the relationship?
Before she responds and answers, I'll say this, and it may be differently from what she stated before. I think a lot of people are reluctant to be totally vulnerable in a relationship starting out because, number one, when you're in a relationship, your goal is to get that person, right? So you're always going to show your best side. I always use me as an example, me and Amanda, and she'll attest to this. So I'm not saying anything she wouldn't say or agree with. When we dated, we did a long distance relationship for about 5 years. Literally every month, I would go to Memphis, she would come here, and we would switch swaps on months. And so I can remember very vaguely that there would be certain disagreements that we would never just really engage in because we know we only had a few days to see each other. And so what happens is you ignore a lot of those red flags, or you ignore a lot of those things where you really want to express yourself because you're saying, I don't want to ruin the weekend, or I don't want to ruin this time together. And so what happens is when you never engage in those tough conversations, when you're never vulnerable, allowing yourself to express yourself to the other person, when you become one, those things can come to a head. And so I think a lot of times people are reluctant to be vulnerable because they don't want to show the vulnerability of who they are, right? Because if somebody sees my weaknesses, or someone sees that I don't have it all together, then I'll push them away. And so I think maybe I'm just the butt of the family, or I'm just one of those people. I would tell you to push those buttons intentionally. intentionally push those buttons before you make a lifetime commitment. Even if you don't even really mean it, try it, do it, see how that other person responds, because I'm telling you, whatever you get when you push those buttons is going to be intensified once you get married. And that's just...
And JaMichael, just to add to what you said, a lot of times people are reluctant to be vulnerable because they are afraid that the relationship is going to end, and they want to continue on, because there are some people out there that just want a relationship for the sake of having a relationship.
That's right.
Kristen actually just said something like that. She said, I think when vulnerability is missing, it's because, I lost it. It's because people are fearful of getting hurt, or there is not trust to be yourself and be vulnerable.
And I agree with that. It doesn't just happen in relationships, it happens inside of marriages. Yeah. And in many instances, it has to do with pride. And I'll have to I have to be honest. Men have a difficult time with vulnerability because and we don't have time, but men and women are cut different. We are different. We are different. And you've got to accept, and you got to know that. And there are some times when a brother lays himself out and become vulnerable, sometimes people go for the jugular. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even when there's a disagreement, we don't step it up. We don't escalate. Sometimes we go straight to the jugular, and the jugular is to shut it down, but it all resorts from being prideful. And that's not just the male, can be the male or the female.
Well, your wife just said, glad mine wasn't pushed because we probably wouldn't be married.
But he said something before. I know it's funny, but he just said something that's very real. Because in moments of vulnerability, when a man is vulnerable and he lets his guard down, whatever that may look like, if he shares something with you in this vulnerable moment, and then something happens a year, 2 years later, and you bring up that moment, he shuts down. He'll never do it again. Because a man, his whole thing about being a man is being tough, being able to control the moment, being able to be himself, being able to be secure. And when you belittle him or you bring up his vulnerable moment, that's one of the most biggest things of distrust. And you'll never hear from that man again.
Especially if you go tell your girls, homegirls.
You cannot take it back. You cannot take words away. You cannot take back words.
And that's kind of what I said. I'm sorry, Dad. I know you want to say. That's kind of like I said last week about love. You know, love. 1 Corinthians 13. It says that love. If you love someone, you don't keep bringing up their wrong. You don't keep bringing up their vulnerabilities and stuff. Because that is so true. It is hard for brothers to be vulnerable because already being vulnerable make you feel weak sometimes. You know, it already make you feel weak subconsciously. So putting yourself out there like that, it gives us the risk of, making you look at us totally different. And that's not what we want.
And can I piggyback on them, because this will be short, I promise. But what those guys said is so true, because usually the first question that comes up with women, why men don't communicate? And most of the time, in many of the instances, it's because they've been bruised like that. And what men do is go into a cave. They go into a cave. That's why you're always hearing about a man cave. It's like, when I can't deal with this, I'm going to shut down. Because and on the other hand, women are many times, I don't always want to say, but men believe that it's better kept in. Women believe if it's in me, I'm going to get it out. And so it starts going at each other. And it goes back to what TJ says. Sometimes you just got to have self-control, okay? Because sometimes between the sexes, it could be about who's going to win. And that's why abuse comes in, because somebody going to have the last word. But it goes back to the real men. Sometimes it's just better to just kind of shut it down and go into your cave You know what I'm saying?
With locks. With locks.
I know what you said. You said it was gonna be short, and it wasn't. So we got.
I wanted to make sure you understood that.
So anyway, moving on. So TJ, you did say you were going to say something, and I have to go back to a comment here, but I don't want to breeze by what you just said. You made the comment about telling, when we're talking about vulnerability, and you made the comment about going back and talking to your girlfriends.
Right.
About what you discussed in your relationship, how that can damage it. And it reminded me of a quote I saw a couple of days ago, and it was talking about women, and it said, it was talking to a man, and it said, if your girlfriend or your wife has a bunch of friends that she talks to more than you, and it seems like they're always in your relationship, that means they're actually your board of directors. They're the board of directors of your relationship. And I just thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
So make sure y'all don't have a board of directors of your relationships, ladies. It's between you and your man. Okay. So Catherine came back because she was the one that was talking about the vulnerability. She said, but shouldn't vulnerability happen throughout the entire stages of the relationship, beginning, the middle, and during it? Reason being, vulnerability comes with connection. Do I need to read that again?
I mean,
JaMichael, I'm gonna pitch it to you, but let's continue to remember that you must be single, unique, and whole going into a relationship, because that's where it starts. And you got to balance everything.
Yeah.
Off of that. Go ahead, JaMichael.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't gonna say much. Just that, yeah, you should always, if you're in a relationship, you should always be able to be vulnerable from beginning to end. I don't think that ever stops. I think that's what makes a relationship stronger, is you continue to be vulnerable and open with one another.
And I think that question probably came in because we were talking and we kept reiterating the beginning of the relationship. So we are coming up on our time. Let's see if we can take one more. We kind of discussed that about men feeling weak, and that's why they don't want to be vulnerable. It was a question, actually. Respect public and behind closed doors. Vulnerability is not to throw shade or bring up stuff, but should be about expression of feelings, needs, wants, emotions, etc. Letting that person.
Who said that?
Catherine.
It's not Libby. Well, it's not.
Adila says, my dad used to always say that what happens in the home should stay in the home, kids included. I know that's right, Adila. Mine said it too. And now that I'm quarantined, I'm here with them. They say the same thing. And I keep my mouth shut. I don't care what they cook. If it's not good, I'm not gonna open my mouth. I can't be alone during quarantine. So this was a good conversation. Single, unique, and whole. That's good. Someone's commenting on what you said, Dad, about being single, unique, and whole. This was a great conversation. Thank you all for joining us. I really, really appreciate you all coming on here for the second week in a row to have these conversations. Once again, these are conversations that we have often. And thank you, cousin Ellwanda, for coming on.
Thank you.
You held it down. You held it down. So thank you so much. We are going to, our next My Story Mondays will actually be for From the Mind of a Woman. And from the mind of a woman, probably be talking about from the emotions of a woman too. It might be more of a relevant title, but that's what we'll be talking about on the next one. So I'll have to gather my crew of women and see how I want to do it. If I want to have some testosterone on it as well, I'm not sure how that's going to go yet. But thank you all for joining us. Does anybody have anything that they would like to say regarding any of the topics before we close this out tonight?
Do you feel like we helped you at all, Dwan?
This wasn't about me.
Sure. It wasn't about this you for this. This was about you for us. We're trying to marry you off. I want my sister to get a godly man.
Yeah,
she's single, y'all.
I second that emotion.
In God's timing. In God's timing.
Oh Lord.
Oh, that's why she brought you on.
I'm single by choice, so let's be clear on that. Single by choice. I refuse to settle for what's less than what the Lord has for me.
All right.
I don't care how old I am. I am not going to settle. I was always almost married a couple times, but I know what God has something for me, and I know I'm willing to wait. I'm worth the wait. I'm worth the wait.
God is preparing him for you. You keep waiting.
That's
And
right.
great advertisement. I appreciate that.
I know my daddy did tell me one time when I was talking about my wedding a few years ago. He said, after 30, a woman pay for her own wedding. My daddy gonna still pay for my wedding, buddy. I want everybody just to give a closeout statement, some wisdom, some knowledge, or just a quote, comment, something before we go. Everyone, just real.
Okay, I'll start. Just want to say that nobody's perfect. There's no perfect relationship. It takes work. Dating takes work, just as marriage takes work. You just have to be committed to hanging in there. And like the one said, don't settle for anything less than God's best.
I'll say become what you desire to have.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's good.
I would say do unto others if you have them do unto you, and give grace, the same grace that you have received from Christ.
I'll piggyback on what Ellwanda said. It doesn't matter whether it's a relationship or whether it's a marriage. It takes work. Marriages don't happen. Relationships don't happen because all of us have issues. It takes work.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you for those words of encouragement. Like I said, this has been a very good live tonight. I appreciate each of you for joining me. My word of advice is that you're worth it. You're worth it. And that goes back to what everyone else was saying tonight, that you have to know who you are. You have to know your worth. You have to know what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. You have to know that at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. And the decisions that you make will determine your future. And a lot of times we find ourselves in relationships and marriages based on temporary satisfaction, temporary instant gratification. And a lot of times we're making decisions that don't really benefit us in the long run. And we're looking at the now. But when you're looking at relationships, and this is why, I've made some of the decisions that I've made. I don't look at my relationships on if I want to be with you today and how well we get along today. I look at my future and where I'm going to be and where our relationship might be. You never know where to end up, but in advance, like I look at my future and what I want and what I desire for the long run. And so thank you all for joining us. Thank you. The chat has been hopping tonight. I can't wait to go back and read some of the comments because I know we missed several comments, but we'll be engaging with you after this is over. Thank you so much. I love you all.
Love you, sis. Proud of you, baby. Proud of you.
Good job.
Good job. All right.